silence is a note that everyone's happy. So yeah, as I say again, thanks to Public Health Agency and Darien City Strabane Council for organising today's session as part of the Disability Awareness Week. It's great to be involved. As I say, it's a very short session. It's 30 minutes long, so I've got 20 minutes basically to give an overview of this piece of work we're doing around the Accessible Outdoor Places Guide. The first 10 minutes will be very much on explaining why we're developing the guide, who we're working with and what the timescales are, etc. The second 10 minutes then will be actually just covering, providing an overview of what we're covering in the guide. Documents very much a work in progress. We're currently finalising the last draft, but it still is very much a draft document, this guide. So moving on then in terms of why we're developing the guide. Basically, as you probably know, disabled people are much less likely to participate in any type of sport or active recreation in Northern Ireland, and that includes things like outdoor recreation, walking, and other outdoor activities. There's statistics pulled together every year by a continuous household survey, and they consistently show that disabled people are actually half as likely to participate in any type of sport, active recreation or walking. So, you know, there's a big level of need there. Things have been improving slightly over the last number of years, and each year we do note a small increase in participation by disabled people. It's around 3 to 4% over the last 4 or 5 years. But the main concern we have at Disability Sport NI is the gap between those who participate and those who don't. Disabled and non-disabled people is the same. So everyone in society are being a little bit more active, as are disabled people, but the gap between disabled and non-disabled people isn't narrowing. So we're really focused on trying to do more to change that. So the first thing is to say, obviously, there's a real need for us and organisations like us to do more to get disabled people active. The second issue why we really want to make the guide happen is that we've noticed an increase in demand in society generally in how people participate in active recreation. So the traditional form, as you all know, is people would tend to participate in organised sports clubs and groups and governing body activities. But there's been a gradual move away to people actually being active through informal activities, things like walking and cycling in particular, but also there's been a much greater increase in demand for outdoor type activities. And we know even in terms of our own programs, there's been a very much an increased demand for things like walking, Nordic walking, exercise classes outdoors, inclusive cycling, also things like angling and water sports activities. And you'll have evidence that in the Darien Strabane area as well, with the recent developments of foil sailability. So there is very much a demand from people, including disabled people, to be more active outdoors. So, there's definite change in demand there. The third issue is alongside this demand from disabled people, we've noticed a lot of public authorities. So the Sports Council, people like the Arts Council, Public Health Agency, all our local district councils, there's more and more willingness and desire there for those bodies to make their outdoor facilities more inclusive, more accessible. And that ranges, I know there's been a lot of activity recently in the Derry Strabane area about making parks more accessible, for example, play parks and play facilities. And that's just one element of lots of different things we've noted from a range of organizations. So to summarize then, there's obviously not enough disabled people participating in outdoor places. There are not enough opportunities. However, the demand from both disabled people themselves is increasing, as is the desire by public agencies and bodies to do more. So that has created a problem. Most recently, we've noticed, particularly around funding programs like the Access and Inclusion Fund, which is a funding program run by the Department for Communities in partnership with the Public Health Agency and the Department of Agriculture, where they're providing grants to local authorities to improve facilities for disabled people in the local area that broaden access for disabled people to art, culture, outdoor recreation. and active recreation. But really, what we were finding was was a lack of guidance in terms of what and both what's best practice and also what the technical guidelines are for designing and building these new accessible facilities in outdoor and active recreation places. Um, Now, if you contrast that with kind of mainstream sport, if you like, for example, through our work with Sport Northern Ireland, there are technical guidance documents, both for sports facilities and also for sports stadia. And likewise, there are also management guidelines for both sports stadia and sports facilities. We have also developed with Sport NI and others guidance on what an inclusive pavilion looks like, what an inclusive boxing facility looks like. So there's a lot of technical guidance out there in the sports sector, but it doesn't really exist in terms of outdoor places. Now, as part of this work, we did do an initial review of what's out there. So we do know, for example, there was a Countryside for All document produced, it was produced by Countryside for All in partnership with Fairfield Trust, which was a good practice guide to disabled people accessing the countryside, but that was back in 2005, so it's quite dated now. We know that that work now has been taken on and has been reviewed in England in partnership with other organisations, and it will also incorporate some guidance that was produced in Wales in 2017, and that was a document called By All Reasonable Means. So we had a look at that, and that we didn't feel actually really met the need in Northern Ireland in terms of what the demand was. But it is something we're looking at and we will liaise with as they develop their guide. We're also very familiar with a document produced by the Irish Wheelchair Association. I think that was in 2017, so only a few years ago as well, in partnership with Sport Ireland. And that was called The Great Outdoors, A Guide for Accessibility. Again, it was a very good document, but we didn't feel it would be appropriate for Northern Ireland because obviously the building regulations and guidance are different in Northern Ireland. And also they had a particular focus and approach. So there are good documents out there, but they're not really relevant to Northern Ireland. They're quite dated now, and they're not really what we were looking for in terms of approach. So we decided that we really needed to develop our own guide, which is to say provided the technical guidance in terms of the drawings and the measurements and all of that, also best practice in terms of what accessible outdoor places look like. In terms of who's supporting this development, we were very much brought to demand the attention of the Public Health Agency, who were very keen to support the initiative. So they have obviously funded the development of the guide in partnership with Derry and Strabane Council, who are facilitating the whole process. So thanks, Louise, for that. So it's been produced by a working group at Disability Sport NI, which involves Sonia, who's our projects manager, who's facilitating today's session, our community sport manager, who's over 20 years experience and is a wheelchair user himself, myself, and also we are doing it in partnership with All Out Consultancy and a lady called Aisling Irvine, who again has literally 20 plus years experience of accessibility, both around sport and also arts and culture. So that's the working group. We are hoping to get this completed by December, and we're on track to do that. Will also be some consultation around that. Now, we've had 5 to 6 months to actually pull this together. It's a very tight time scale, so we don't have the luxury to go out the public consultation. It'll be very much around expert individuals and agencies in Northern Ireland who we have a relationship with, but that it would also involve an access group which we set up to look at these areas around sport, and that includes all the main disability organisations, people like Action Hearing Loss, Disability Action, RNID, etc., etc. It goes on and on. So we've all the key agencies and organisations there who will feed into this document. And as I say, the plan is to have the final draft completed this side of Christmas, and then hopefully we'll actually have the final published version very early in the new year. So that's a very quick overview. So moving on to the next couple of slides now, we'll basically cover what we're actually covering in the guide, if that makes sense, what the various sections are. And this has evolved as we've gone through the process. So I think at the minute there's 7 sections, and the first one is really all about accessible parking and external routes. So that's, you know, from when you approach an outdoor places, where do you park, where do you get access to the place, what the widths of paths should be, what the clear head height should be, what the surfaces should be, covering issues like obstacles on external routes, gateways. Gateways in the outdoor environment is a big issue, because the vast majority of gates currently in an outdoor environment, gates and stiles, are inaccessible to a lot of disabled people because of their current design. As I say, there's no clear guidance at the minute, you know, what that looks like. We also looked at the classification of external routes, which, to be honest, is probably the most difficult issue we're dealing with, in that in a built environment, you know, we can very clearly set best practice guidance based on building regulations and good practice. A corridor width should be whatever in a sports centre, for example, to allow 2 wheelchair users and sports chairs to pass each other comfortably. But because there's such a range of different types of external environments and places, it's very difficult to pull that together. But I think we're making good progress on that. And, you know, at the end of the day, we will have some very good guidance on what that looks like. But it will very much depend on the nature of the facility. So if you take that at its most ridiculous, you know, if it's a city, if it's a playground facility in a city park, of course you can ask for, you know, very good, accessible, wide paths with very good gradients. However, if it's a country park, the closest one near to me here is Cave Hill Country Park, which is literally up the side of a mountain. You know, what's reasonable in terms of what the surface of that path looks like, how wide it is. You know, do we insist that people remove stiles and cattle grids and all of that? We're going to make our very best effort at that and provide very clear guidance based on the type of outdoor space. The second area we're covering is all around play parks and play facilities. And within that is what we call multi-sensory green space. For any of you who are familiar with the world of play, or you know, the whole nature of play is changing away from play parks to more play areas and areas that people can explore, children can explore. Likewise, there's a move away from fixed multi-sensory gardens, you know, where you can lead blind, partially sighted people around, to more multi-sensory experience within a broader green space. So that section we're looking at is, say, inclusive play parks and multi-sensory green space. The third area is very much around what we call outdoor places amenities. So those are all the things in an outdoor space that actually make it easier for a disabled person to use comfortably. So it includes things like resting places and seating. Again, it seems very common sense, but we do know a lot of people with mobility difficulties will be much quicker to use an outdoor space if there's resting places and seating that they can use, you know, evenly spaced throughout a park or an outdoor place. Also, we're looking at things like shelters and picnic tables, because again, we have noticed there's a tendency not even to think about the fact that people not on their feet will be using those facilities, and of course they do. So that's something we're looking at. Things like bird hides and observation platforms. Again, we do know there's a tendency out there not even to think of disabled people in those outdoor environments. And again, it's actually about putting it out there that, you know, those are valid requirements if we're genuine about being inclusive in an outdoor environment and outdoor places. And the final one is around assistance dog spending areas. Again, that's something now that really only has happened in a sort of significant way in sports facilities and outdoor places over the last number of years. But for people who use assistance dogs, mostly it's guide dogs or blinds, but also there's other people who use assistance dogs at the moment. But not having a spending area will make it won't make it difficult for those people to use the venue, but it'll put a barrier in there that'll make them reluctant to use outdoor places. So it's a very important one. The fourth section is all about wayfinding, signs, and information. And, you know, it's all the things that you think of that help guide people around outdoor places. Signage in a built environment is one of the biggest issues that's brought to our attention nowadays. 20 years ago, as you can expect, before the DDA, it was all about access to buildings and ramps and gradients and whatever. And of course, that's still important. But the issues that we find increasingly now is as inclusive design is improved, the issues tend to be around the lack of accessible seating, the lack of good signage that everyone can read. There's a complication now in Northern Ireland with people having bi and trilingual signage, you know, because of the Irish language and Ulster Scots. And by implementing that, sometimes it makes signage inaccessible to partially sighted people. So the same applies outdoors in terms of it's so important now to have very good signage, very good wayfinding, and where information is provided, that it's in an accessible format as reasonable as possible. So moving on to section 5, I'll let Sonia move us down. Yeah, access to water. Again, if you look at things like angling, there's always been a relatively high number of disabled people involved in angling, which is very worthwhile. But we have noticed now an increased demand for people to participate in all sorts of outdoor water-based activities. There are 4 sailability clubs in Northern Ireland. You know, there's they're the latest ones in the Northwest, Foy Sailability. There's one in Greater Belfast, one which is based in Carrickfergus. There's one now in Lough Erne, and the 4th one's gone out of my head, but there's a 4th. And there's also other venues, water sports venues in Craigavon, for example, which are very actively promoting water sports activities. But again, it's a move for us that if a local authority or a public agency install a jetty, a pontoon, provide access to beaches, which has happened for the first time through the May Murray Foundation, that they're taking on board all the issues they think around how you help people with a range of disabilities to access those same venues. So that's a section we're very pleased with because it's providing a lot of good advice. I should say on this point, you know, we're not sitting in a room here coming up with this. This is based on desk research literally around the world, best practice throughout Europe, UK and Ireland, and also in America. And we're pulling that together as best we can and working out what makes best sense for us here in Northern Ireland. The 6th section is all around outdoor wheelchairs, adapted cycles, and what we call their inclusive all-terrain vehicles. We'll actually probably change the name of that title because what we found over recent years, there's lots of designers that designed a whole range of wheelchairs that can be used in an outdoor environment. You know, there's adapted bikes and inclusive cycles. There are a whole range of them. We've actually provided a lot of them. Now there's a disability sports hub in each of the district councils. In Derry and Strabane, it's in St. Colum's Park. And there's a whole range of bikes that meet a whole range of different people's needs. But a lot of this equipment now has been designed with big chunky wheels, different ways of propelling chairs, both manually and also through electric powered equipment to get people into the outdoors. We recently developed a project in partnership with Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon Council, funded by the Department of Communities, called All Out Trekking, which is in Gosford Forest Park, just outside Armagh. And if you actually see the photo there on the middle of the slide, there's 2 buggies there. The one on the left is called a Quadrix, and it's an electric powered vehicle. It's hand controlled. It's basically been designed to replicate the mountain bike experience for people who are either wheelchair users or have other mobility issues. We've also adapted the hand controls so that people with very limited function in their hand can control the vehicle. And I say it's electric, it's not noisy at all. And we use that to take people around the mountain bike trails in Gosford Forest Park. The other vehicle there is basically more like a trumped up mobility scooter. You know, it enables people to travel around an outdoor environment at a very, very slow space, but you can almost get anywhere in that vehicle in that it's driven slowly. It'll literally go over a tree trunk. So that's just an example of 2. We've got other bits of equipment there, but we did it took us about 2 years developing that project because what we're finding now in terms of accessibility in the outdoor environment, any type of new designs, equipment is very much manufacturer-led, and manufacturers approach you and say, this is the best bit of kit that's out there for disabled people. What we did was we got, I think it was over 20 pieces of kit on site. Well, we desk researched probably more like 40, 50 bits of kit, ruled out the ones we didn't think were appropriate or didn't seem safe or weren't available in Northern Ireland. Then we got about 20 bits of kit. We took it to the Forest Park in Gosford, got a whole range of disabled people, people on their feet, people amputees, wheelchair users, people with limited function on one side, people with very poor function in their hands, and we had to test all the bits of equipment. And we came up with, as a result of that research, with a range that worked best for the greatest range of people. The one group of disabled people we still haven't been able to fully include are blind and partially sighted people, because there's nothing that's been designed out there, but it's something we're very aware of. So that's a section basically providing guidance on the type of equipment out there, what we feel works, what works best in different environments. And the final section is something we hadn't originally included, which is the importance of maintenance. And again, initially we didn't think it was part of the brief, but just going through the whole process, it's something that comes up time and time again. It's all good designing accessible and inclusive outdoor places, but if they're not maintained regularly, they become very inaccessible very quickly, just because of the nature of the venues. So that's my 20 minutes in terms of the overview. As I say, I mentioned it earlier, the next stage for us now is to consult with key individuals and organisations throughout Northern Ireland, just to test what we've come up with, and then to make final decisions and get the document published. So I'm 2 minutes, we started 2 minutes late and I'm 4 minutes over, so that's not too bad for my own. So very happy if anyone at this stage has any questions.
I don't think any questions, Kevin, but just thank you very much for producing the document. It's going to be a real benefit to the likes of myself within council, and I'm sure.
Well, that's really good to hear, and actually, and I do think the key issue out there is just the lack of good, clear guidance. And I think this is only the first step. I think it's something we probably need to review in 3-4 years' time, actually, as the guidance, you know, as we become more knowledgeable about what works and what doesn't.
Just need a lot of money to be able to support us to make the changes.
Well, that's not one for me, but I do know that the plans are there to continue to run the Access and Inclusion Fund. And, you know, I think this is the 3rd year now that program's going. It's about £1 million a year. And I do know that, you know, we're actually engaged with a bit of work reviewing the fund for the DFC at the minute. What we find is that each year of the process, knowledge out there has improved in terms of what is good. There's fewer poor applications and more better applications, but I think as a result of this guide and all our initiatives, you know, the quality of the projects will increase.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff.
All right, Kelly.
Kevin, thank you very much for the overview. It's been very, very beneficial. This is Louise here, Derry City and Strabane District Council. I'm just wondering, now, as you rightly say, the grant aid is growing year on year through DFC, and this document will absolutely create a significant impact in regards to direction, more so for the recreation rather than the arts and culture. One of the things that struck me there throughout all of this, because you are conducting a very comprehensive piece of work, you did make note about the blind and partially sighted, where there was a lack of equipment or provisions for that target group. And I wonder, throughout the consultation process and being involved with the likes of RNIB, did anybody come up with any solution-focused approaches or concepts that could be driven forward or shared with another organisation to meet that gap in provision? Did anything like that come up?
I think the gap in provision, as mentioned, there was very much around the all-out trekking project, you know, and getting people to have that mountain bike kind of experience in the outdoors at Gosford Forest Park. So there is a gap of provision there, but more generally in terms of all access issues that will apply for blind, partially sighted people in an outdoor environment, I think that's pretty well covered, and we're pretty knowledgeable in that in terms of what signage and wayfinding looks like. So I think we're pretty good on that. I think there is good guidance out there. The gap is really around, the vehicle stroke buggies that give people that mountain biking experience or that outdoor environment. When we ran that project, we had people who'd been in wheelchairs who had difficulties for 20, 30 years. And they said, I never thought I'd be able to independently go out in a forest park, one, and, secondly, have a mountain bike experience. So to me, it's so important. When we started 20 years ago, people couldn't access leisure centres. Seems crazy now, but there was no physical access, and that's where that's where the focus was. Of course, things have improved so much, and that's excellent. But I do think taking it to the next stage and looking at these issues around outdoor places is actually genuinely pushing good practice. And what I'd like to see is the type of project we have, all out trekking in Gosford Forest Park at the moment. There should be more of those in more locations in Northern Ireland, so they're accessible to everyone, and people can have those experiences. And I think that's the other thing for me, Louise, how things have changed. We need to move away from focus on the physical environment. It's very important, but it's not that's important, but it's not the physical improvements for themselves. It's how they improve people's experiences of active recreation and how it improves the opportunities that people have to lead active and satisfying lives.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kevin. And you're absolutely right. I feel that what should be created is an opportunity for accessibility for all. And that taking that approach and having that concept, and especially within technical documents, that will serve well for years to come. So thank you today for your overview. It's been very beneficial.
You're welcome. I think we're just coming up to the end of the session, but if anyone has any other questions, I'm more than happy to take them. We're good.
Good. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I just finished up then by saying if anyone wants to contact us, Sonia, who's facilitating today's session, her email address is there. Sonia is the one who's leading on the guide at the minute. So if anyone wants to send any email comments or any feedback or would like to be involved in the consultation, please get in touch with Sonia and let her know, and we'll make that happen.
Sorry, Kevin. It's Ronan O'Donnell here. I was just trying to unmute and I couldn't. I've just worked it out. No, I'll tell you what it is. I'm in the committee of a club, Foil Paddlers Canoe Club. Yep. You've mentioned the Access Inclusive Fund, and it's only open to local authorities. Is there any grants open to clubs? Because, see, we had one disabled member, wheelchair bound, and we had a special boat for one person, but again, we're limited beyond that. We do Special Olympics training, but that's all pool-based. But it's the type of thing you can fit out riggers to canoes, but again, there's cost and all these things, and for a club that's run for its members, there's not a lot of cash about, as you can appreciate.
Yeah.
Anywhere we should be looking?
First thing, there's no obvious sources, but there are opportunities. The first one is the Access and Inclusion Fund, although that's aimed at local authorities. A lot of local authorities put forward community projects for that fund. So that's an option open to you. The second issue is there's the usual, the small grants scheme at Big Lottery, which is very good at supporting initiatives like that. I see if you send us your email address, Ronan, what I'll do is I'll ask our community sport manager to give you a ring and just have a chat through some of the options.
That'd be very helpful.
Yeah. So it basically depends on what your setup is there, what your facilities are, and what you're looking for. But it's a guy called Aubrey Bingham. We'll get Aubrey to give you a call and make sure you have a chat and see what we can come up with.
Because we are a registered charity. So that would probably help us.
Absolutely.
I would imagine. But if I'll send you an email address through Louise, and then maybe if we can get in touch, I'd be really appreciate it.
Perfect. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Okay, unless there's anything else, I think that's us. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everyone for listening. It feels like these things always feel like a one-way conversation, but it's the nature of the beast. So thanks for listening. And as I say, if you've any questions, please get in touch with myself or Sonia.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Okay.